Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in history, betrayed by his own son. But what if everything you know about his assassination is a lie? What if the real conspiracy was far darker than 60 senators with daggers? Today, we expose the brutal truth they don't want you to know about the Ides of March. Because Caesar's assassination wasn't just murder, it was the blueprint for every political betrayal that followed. Here's what they don't teach you in school. Caesar didn't just conquer Gaul, he committed genocide. Over 1 million dead, 3 million enslaved, all to fund his political machine back in Rome. But here's the shocking part. Caesar was broke when he started. His family had money, sure, but not empire-changing wealth. So how did a bankrupt politician become the richest man in Rome? Blood money. Every village burned in Gaul, every slave sold in the markets, every ounce of gold stolen from Celtic temples. It all flowed back to Rome, buying loyalty from senators, feeding the masses, and creating the most dangerous army the world had ever seen. An army that answered to Caesar alone. By 49 BC, when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he wasn't just breaking the law, he was declaring war on the Roman establishment, with an army of killers who owed him everything. Now here's where the story gets twisted. You've been told that Brutus was Caesar's honorable friend, reluctantly drawn into conspiracy. Complete lie. Brutus wasn't Caesar's friend, he was his political rival. And that rumor about being Caesar's illegitimate son? Propaganda spread by Brutus himself to gain sympathy after the assassination. The real conspiracy started with Cassius. But not for the reasons you think. Cassius wasn't defending the Republic, he was bankrupt. Caesar had destroyed his business deals in Syria, and Cassius was facing financial ruin. This wasn't about freedom, it was about money. But here's the part that will shock you. The conspiracy involved over 60 senators, but only 23 actually showed up to kill Caesar. The rest chickened out at the last minute. What does that tell you about their noble cause? And Caesar knew. Roman intelligence networks were vast, and whispers of conspiracy had reached his ears weeks before the Ides of March. So why didn't he act? Because he wanted to die. This is the secret historians buried for 2,000 years. Caesar was sick. Not just politically exhausted, physically dying. Ancient sources mention seizures, headaches, and strange episodes. Modern doctors believe he had temporal lobe epilepsy, getting worse each year. Caesar knew his mind was failing. He'd watched his own uncle deteriorate from the same condition. The great conqueror was terrified of becoming a drooling invalid, mocked by the same masses who once cheered him. So Caesar orchestrated his own assassination. Think about it. The world's most paranoid dictator goes to the Senate with no bodyguards? After multiple warnings? After his wife's nightmares? Caesar didn't ignore the omens. He welcomed them. The conspirators thought they were saving Rome. In reality, they were Caesar's unwitting executioners, giving him the hero's death he craved instead of the slow decline he feared. March 15th, 44 BC. The theater of Pompeii. What happened next wasn't chaos. It was a choreographed slaughter. Tullius Cimber grabs Caesar's toga, the signal. But here's what no one tells you. Caesar didn't fight back immediately. Witnesses said he stood there for the first few stabs, almost accepting them. Only when he saw Brutus, the man who'd been spreading rumors about being his son, did Caesar react, not with shock, but with disgust. Et tu, Brute, wasn't heartbreak. It was contempt. Caesar's final insult to the coward who'd hidden behind family lies. 23 wounds. But forensic analysis of ancient accounts reveals only one was fatal. A stab to the chest that pierced his aorta. The other 22? Frenzied attacks by senators, desperate to be part of history, slashing at a man already dying. Caesar collapsed at the base of Pompey's statue, his old rival. Even in death, the symbolism was perfect. Almost planned. Here's the conspiracy within the conspiracy. Mark Antony knew Caesar wanted to die. Caesar had confided in Antony about his illness, his fears, his desire for a glorious end. When Antony delivered that famous funeral speech, he wasn't just mourning his friend, he was executing Caesar's final political masterstroke. That bloody toga? Antony had it specially prepared with extra blood for maximum dramatic effect. Caesar's will, leaving money to the citizens, written weeks before the assassination. Even his funeral was a calculated performance designed to destroy his killers. And it worked. Within hours, Rome was burning. The liberators were fleeing for their lives. And Caesar? He got exactly what he wanted. Eternal fame as a martyred hero, instead of a forgotten invalid. But the deepest conspiracy wasn't Caesar's death. It was what came after. Augustus, Caesar's heir, didn't accidentally become Rome's first emperor. He was Caesar's ultimate backup plan. Caesar had been grooming Augustus for years, teaching him that the Republic was already dead, that only imperial power could save Rome. Caesar's assassination wasn't the end of the Republic. It was the excuse Augustus needed to bury it forever. Every dictator since Caesar has used the same playbook: create a crisis. Present yourself as the only solution, then orchestrate your own martyrdom, whether literal death or political persecution, to justify absolute power. Sound familiar? It should. Because this pattern repeats every few decades, in every country, by leaders who've studied Caesar's real legacy. So the next time someone talks about Caesar's assassination, remember, it wasn't 60 noble senators saving democracy. It was one dying dictator manipulating his enemies into giving him exactly what he wanted: immortality. The real conspiracy wasn't against Caesar. It was by Caesar, against history itself. Because the greatest trick Julius Caesar ever pulled was convincing the world that he was the victim. Caesar's blood didn't just stain the Senate floor. It stained the blueprint of power that every dictator since has followed. And that is the brutal truth they don't want you to know. What other heroes of history were actually the villains of their own stories? Subscribe to Expose Leaders, and we'll show you exactly how deep these conspiracies go.